Originally, I was going to just do this as a run-of-the-mill pre-recorded video like I always do with all my videos, but this headline right here made me want to turn it into a triple P. So they say White Lives Matter rally flops as hardly anyone shows up. The poor turnout underscores how the country's unpopular and disorganized extremist movements have been driven underground. What makes this so funny to me is that this isn't the first time they've had a low turnout for anything that kind of relates to this so-called movement that they have right here, because they've done this before in the past and they've had low turnouts before. I remember pre-COVID-19, they tried to have these little dust ups and that's all they collected out of it was a bunch of dust. And it's crazy because while I'm not a fan of BLM because of the direction that it took over the years, they lack so much originality. I mean, it started off with Black Lives Matter. Then they said All Lives Matter. Then they said Blue Lives Matter. Now they have White Lives Matter. The ones that come after BLM really aren't original. But they claim they hate BLM so much, but we know why they don't like BLM. Like I've always said in my videos, and I always have to clarify it every time I do the comparison contrast. Our reason for not liking BLM and their reason for not liking BLM is two different reasons. We know why they are pushing, we know BLM for the most part is pushing an agenda. And what agenda they're pushing. For those over there of the Fox News kind and some of them over there who watch CNN and who don't like BLM is a whole nother reason. Basically, the reason Palm Color doesn't like it is way different than the reason we don't like it. Theirs is pretty much rooted in racism. Ours is rooted in, we know it's an agenda based being pushed. But back to this, just reading this headline, and mind you, I haven't read the article yet, but this is funny to me because every time they try to have some kind of counter movement to something, it never goes their way. But what makes me question this whole thing is, why are they having a White Lives Matter rally anyway? Their lives have always mattered. Like, is it because their numbers are dwindling? Is it because of the opioids, the low birth rates? What is it? I'm not sure. I really don't know what it could possibly be. But the thing is, apparently white lives must not mean much to white people because they always have low turnouts. And I think it's a competition thing. Like, they try to think that they're going to get the same numbers as a BLM rally or protest or whatever. And the fact of the matter is, despite how we feel about BLM, they'll never get those kind of numbers, especially after what happened last year with George Floyd. They got the world involved. The globe was watching this. And I think they're just upset that they don't get that kind of attention. And the thing is, why would they need it? They're not the ones with the target on their back. So I think that they're just doing this to try to crave attention at the end of the day. But at this point, it's a joke. It's pathetic and it's laughable. Now, with that being said, let me get into this article. In semi-private encrypted chats, neo-Nazis and other far-right extremists planned rallies in dozens of cities Sunday to promote their racist movements and spread their ideologies to larger audiences. Hyped by organizers as events that would make the world tremble, the rallies ran into a major problem. Hardly anyone showed up. Now, what's funny about this is they said they had multiple rallies through different places, and it was a low turnout at every last one of them. In order for them to have a big turnout, they probably would have had to take all the people that showed up at every single rally and dump them in one location, and even then their numbers would probably still be relatively small. The White Lives Matter rallies, the first major real-world organizing efforts by white supremacists since 2018, were planned on the encrypted app Telegram after many aligned groups were alleged to have taken part in the January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol. The poor showing underscores how the country's unpopular and disorganized extremist movements have been driven underground by increased scrutiny from the media, law enforcement agencies, and far left activists who infiltrate their private online spaces and disrupt their attempts to communicate and organize. Few White Lives Matter marchers showed up Sunday, but anti-racist and anti-fascist groups gathered just the same. In Raleigh, North Carolina, a small crowd of Antifa and anti-racist protesters gathered at the park where the White Lives Matter march was planned. They marched around downtown behind a large white sign that read, "We accept your surrender." The lackluster events were documented by live streams and photos posted to Twitter. In Philadelphia, activists tweeted photos of a counter-protest picnic with pizza and tasty cake snacks. In New York City, over a dozen counter-protesters stood seemingly unopposed across the street from Trump Tower, where a White Lives Matter rally was expected. Police in downtown Albuquerque, New Mexico, formed a circle around a lone protester to separate himself from a large crowd of counter-protesters. 3 protesters assembled around a White Lives Matter banner outside City Hall in Fort Worth, Texas, where a police line separated them from a couple of dozen counter-protesters. Hundreds of counter-protesters, bystanders, and media members gathered at a counter-protest at the scheduled start time of a White Lives Matter march at Huntington Beach Pier, southeast of Los Angeles. Throughout the afternoon, counter-protesters could be seen on several live streams chanting unity and community and Black Lives Matter. A few single protesters, one of whom wore a full hood and a t-shirt with a white supremacist slogan, were run off by the crowd, who yelled "Go home, Nazis." According to flyers for the event, which recycled images from an old propaganda from the disbanded neo-Nazi organization Vanguard America, the marches were meant to take a stand against the media, government, and educational institutions that are anti-white. I'm trying to figure out which one of those organizations or those outlets are considered to be anti-white. That's what I'm trying to figure out. So here's the thing. They are used to how things are used to be. That's why they hung on to 45 so much with the Make America Great Again thing. This is a part of that. They want to go back to how everything was when they really had a full stronghold on everything. Not saying they don't have one now, but it's not as strong as it was like 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe even hundreds of years ago. They don't have that anymore because the world is evolving, but they're not evolving with it, and they're mad about that. And the thing is, they've gotten so far with their rhetoric that they can't evolve. Like, this is it for them. This is like, they are literally approaching a dead end. Like, you know how when you're driving, you see the dead end sign, and if you keep going past it, you're probably going to end up in the woods somewhere. That's where they're headed right now. The slogan White Lives Matter has been promoted on flyers and banners by white supremacist groups, including neo-Nazis and KKK groups, since 2015 as a racist response to the Black Lives Matter movement, according to the Anti-Defamation League. In 2016, White Lives Matter was designated a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Several White Lives Matter rallies were held that year. Confederate flag waving protesters gathered outside NAACP headquarters in Houston, and arrests were made in Austin, Texas, when a group of White Lives Matter protesters clashed with counter demonstrators. Sunday's round of racist rallies seemed destined for failure, said Megan Squire, a computer science professor at Elon University in North Carolina, who tracks online extremism. The online organizers of the North Carolina rally were uninformed about state law governing protests, including laws that disallow firearms, Squire said. The organizers were also generally inept at using Telegram, where the event was announced, and unable to identify obvious trolls in their midst. The efforts behind Sunday's rallies were haphazard and ill-informed, Squire said. They're not sending their best. So basically, one major reason why this stuff is failing is because they don't have the proper people to put out this type of information. Apparently, they have some amateurs back there. That's what it's sounding like to me. The White Lives Matter rallies were disrupted in several cities after activists infiltrated their online groups and leaked internal chats to journalists. Those chats were reported to have indicated that the events were being planned by the extremist group the Proud Boys and by self-described fascists and Nazis who framed the rallies as peaceful events unaffiliated with known hate groups to recruit more mainstream members. Organizers in several cities canceled events because of sabotage by Antifa activists. Raleigh's organizer called off a rally Friday, telling subscribers it turns out that the 11th is a disaster. Two of the largest Telegram channels dedicated to events in Philadelphia and New York City were shown to be traps created by anti-fascist activists. Another local activist tweeted screenshots of the plans revealed with a warning Saturday to would-be rally goers. Given how riddled these chats are with anti-fascists, it might be time to rethink whether you really want to trust a bunch of anonymous internet weirdos to show up with you in your city. The ineptitude of organizers notwithstanding, experts say that with the U.S. extremist movement is an inflection point, and that would be participants are discouraged by the increased negative attention in the prosecutions of members in such movements after the Capitol attack. The white supremacist movement faced a similar reckoning in 2017 after the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. Instead of unifying distinct bands of white supremacist groups, the murder of counter-protester Heather Heyer and the full-throated hate on display with tiki torch wielding neo-Nazis invited national condemnation, legal troubles, and in-group squabbling that fracture individual organizations and the hate movement overall. After Charlottesville, there were weak attempts to revisit former glory, Squire said, recalling rallies where a handful of white supremacists who had the alt-right movement were outnumbered by anti-racist counter-protesters. The wind was knocked out of their sails, and the legal cases brought that fall certainly didn't help. So this shows right here that their best days are behind them. And it happened rather quickly. See, it says right there, they weren't able to bounce back from that. And they've been trying to relive it, but they just can't, no matter how hard they try. This is why they scream White Lives Matter, because they feel like they're being silenced. But the thing is, they've been screaming and loudly, and in their case proudly, for many, many years. And it's always had repercussions, not only so much for themselves, but for those around them that did not want to be affected by their rhetoric. But they don't see that. But it's okay. It's all right, I guess. Hate hasn't disappeared, but membership in formal extremist groups may have been disincentivized. So far, 369 federal cases have been brought against people accused of involvement in the Capitol siege, according to a database maintained by the Program of Extremism at George Washington University. About 36 of those charged are members and associates of the Proud Boys, the pro-Trump street fighting gang, and the Oath Keepers militia group. Both are accused of coordinating between far-right groups, and they face the most serious federal charges related to the January 6th, including conspiracy to breach the Capitol. Beyond legal consequences, self-described Antifa activists have made it costly to be associated with far-right and racist groups, many of them using online sleuthing to match participants at extremist rallies to their real-life identities and employers. Mainstream online platforms where extremists were once welcome have also tightened their policies about violent extremist content and groups. Not only have organized larger groups splintered, but so too did their social media footprint, said Brian Levin, director of the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University, San Bernardino. Some extremists had continued a whack-a-mole migration underground to encrypted affinity-based platforms, while others exited these movements altogether. The realignment and the lack of cohesive leadership don't lessen the threat from extremist groups, however. The risk now, Levin says, can be found in loners and cells who act on their own combination of hatred and idiosyncrasies, and I probably butchered that word, idiosyncrasies, often cobbled together from a constant all-you-can-eat buffet of stereotyping and conspiracies that still populate online discourse. All in all, every time they put something together like this, it's always going to be a failure. So they might as well just stop doing it. Because the thing is, no one takes them seriously. Like, you're literally yelling out White Lives Matter while numbers are dwindling. You're still the majority in this establishment, and people are still like following behind you no matter what you do. So whatever you're doing is always just falling on deaf ears every single time. But you still continue to act like an ass anyway, and these are the results that are going to constantly come up when it comes to you in whatever movement that you're trying to push or agenda. So just quit while you're not so much ahead, you're kind of behind at this point. So you've actually used up all your aheadness. I know that's not a word, but I'm making it one right now. But the thing is, they're trying to relive glory days that have long gone, dried up, and have passed them by, and they can't accept defeat. They are not willing to wave the white flag. But that's okay, because, people lie, numbers don't. And as you can see, the numbers definitely showed that they weren't going to go anywhere. They're not going to really go anywhere. It is what it is. I feel nothing. And I know the ones who are listening to this probably feel nothing as well. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. If you have not done so already, make sure that you text the number that is pinned down in the comments below so you can receive notifications every time I go live or upload a new video.